right. Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you, Matt, for the introduction. So we're from OpenAI, and we're going to be talking about security research and our reflections on AIxCC, where the research currently is, where it has been, and where it's going. So you've got me, Ian Brelinsky. I'm a program manager at OpenAI in the security research team. We've also got Dave Aitel at the end, who is a renowned security researcher who is also on our security research team at OpenAI. And then finally, Matt Knight, who is our vice president of security products and research here at OpenAI. So let me start by actually turning it over to Matt for a little bit of background on our involvement in AIxCC and our security research efforts.
Cool, thanks Ian. Thanks everybody for being here. I want to start just by acknowledging the competitors in the AI Cyber Challenge. Can you raise your hand? Are there any competitors in the audience? Round of applause for everybody for making it to the finals. For an amazing showing. Thank you so much for participating in the program over the last 2 years. The real work starts now. There's an amazing amount of data out there that we're going to be able to explore as a community, really learn how these systems succeeded, where we have to go together. But before we explore that, I want to maybe rewind and reflect on where we started with this program. So Perry Adams, the DARPA PM who sort of got this off the ground, reached out to me in, I think it was late 2022 or 2023, or early 2023, with this idea, right? You know, she was seeing what was happening in generative AI, reflecting on some prior DARPA endeavors in the space, and wanted to put the two together. So she approached us about doing was effectively Cyber Grand Challenge 2.0. What if we had the chance to revisit a grand effort around software security using modern advances in generative AI? And remember, what I said to her was, whatever you do it fast, because the pace of progress and innovation in the space is blistering, right? And again, this was like end of 2022, beginning of 2023. The cutting edge frontier model at the time was GPT 3.5, right? Here we are, it's 2025. GPT-5 came out 2 days ago. We've had, sort of many frontiers smashed in the almost, roughly 2 years that followed. And we've seen these tools, these language models evolve from, being sort of curiosities, these, tools that are, were interesting to developers and we're very nascent in their ability, to tools that really have a lot to offer, all different kinds of industries, right? And I think it has a lot to offer ours too. So with GPT-4 and some of the more modern models, we've seen all sorts of doors get open to security practitioners. And I think collectively, we are in this like perpetual first inning of discovery with what these tools can do for security. And I think the 7 finalist teams in this program have really demonstrated what's possible here. So thank you all for participating. Thank you to DARPA and ARPA-H for running such an amazing program. Shout out to Andrew Carney for for orchestrating all this and their leadership for bringing us together. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a great discussion here.
Awesome. So let me turn it over to Dave and ask you a little bit. How did you actually get involved in security research? What's your background with AIxCC? Because I know it started before you joined OpenAI. And where was the research at that time? And what have you seen for its evolution up until today?
All right. Well, Ian never asks just one question, but I will counter that with the reality here is that I don't even, in my head, like many of you, describe myself as a security researcher. I describe myself internally as a hacker, right? Like an old school Unix hacker. That's like real hacking is on Unix. Like this guy knows what I'm talking about right here. Last night I'm sitting at a bar with my kids, and the guy next to me, clearly a DEF CON person, spinning around in his chair, something that DEF CON people do. And I was asking him, like, hey, man, you work for AWS? Because he's got an AWS t-shirt on. And he's like, no, but, obviously I do a lot of stuff with the Unix. And I was like, me too. And he's like, no, you don't. And I'm like, yeah, man, I've used True64. I've used, DG Unix. I've used HPUX, all of them. You name it, Spark, I can do all the Unixes. And he's like, okay. And we went through like this laundry list of things. And I think the reality is that if you think of yourself internally as a hacker, you're always on the cutting edge and trying to find new ways to do this stuff. And that's why so many of us went so hard into the large language models so early. We're like, oh, all your tools are broken and nothing seems to work reliably? That's the perfect place for us. We love that sort of thing. So, I felt like it was a very natural evolution to, as soon as this stuff started getting good, and I was actually a little later than Matt was, obviously. But when I saw what Perry was doing with the program, with AIxCC, I said, that's fascinating. And it's almost like you get nerd sniped by just trying it once. Who here has found a bug with any of the like OpenAI models? Right? Like we've all found one bug, and then you're like, what if I could find all the bugs? Right? Like that's your mentality. And then you start getting into it and you start spending thousands and thousands of your own money on API credits, and you're like, this there's got to be a better way. So that's kind of how I got started. It's almost like, how do you not get started? How are you not fascinated with this question of, can the machine do what I do, right? And it can. It's better than me at this point. I'm not amazing, but it's definitely, I like to say it's like there's a goldfish who can not hack very well, and then there's me, and then there's like Mark Dowd on the other end of that. And it's better than me, but not as good as Mark Dowd, right? So that's kind of how I figure on the spectrum of the large language models and how well they think about these things.
If I could just reflect on it, going back to like one of our first calls on this topic, like, you'd put out some really great research of your own, blog posts, things like that, on applying language models to certain, like security problems. And I remember we had a great call, and I was thinking, boy, wouldn't it be great? Maybe I can get Dave to take like some API credits or something like that to support your work. And you turn around and you're like, what if I just came and did it with you guys? And I was like, I didn't know that was an option. So great to have you on the team. It's been a lot of fun.
And it really has been a journey, and I think AIxCC has been a big part of that journey, learning from all the teams as they did so much. I think one of the things that is maybe a little twisted about AIxCC is that it is a contest. And I think that there's an emotional attachment to it as a contest. But certainly, it's not only a contest. It's also a demonstration of where we are right now in this field, which I think is really important.
So let's talk about where we are right now. And actually, let's start by talking about where we've come from. Even just a year ago, when you look at OpenAI's evaluations for cybersecurity capabilities, they were not nearly as good as what they are today. Just a year ago, when looking at the professional level benchmarks for cyber, we were doing in the teens, maybe a little bit higher than that. Now, the models are absolutely killing it. They're getting most of the questions right. And that's just 1 year of evolution. What's been, your career in this field's been much longer, obviously, than the last year of evolution with AI. What are your perspectives on where the field was like a decade ago to where it was a year ago to where it is today? And what are the main themes you've seen with that?
So I've been doing security for like 25 years now at some level, which is, by the standards of DEF CON, probably just normal. But by the standards of like people at large language model companies, I'm an ancient dinosaur. And early on, fuzzing had a really interesting sort of curve, as well, like a technology adoption curve, if you will, right? So for those of you who were back in the 2000s, when fuzzing really started going, it was only used by attackers for a little while, right? Like almost for like 5 to 10 years, actually. And then AFL came out, and defenders started scaling it up. And it became a defensive tool. It became part of your SDLC. And I think one of the great things about AIxCC is that the goal is to change that technology adoption curve from only attackers are going to be using these tools to everybody's going to be using these tools, to democratize the ability to take all of the low-hanging fruit out of the source code and get all that stuff fixed. And frankly, it's not just security. It's going to be reliability. It's going to be a lot of other things. And I think that's really important to change how things were done back in the day, like to change the way we look at these new technology adoptions and make these things just part of everyday life. And so that's definitely one of the things that I think is different this time around. But the similarity is it's a brand new technology. It finds a lot of problems, and we want to solve those problems as quickly as possible.
Let's get a little bit more local to AIxCC and DARPA for a second. So Matt, you were talking about when you got involved in the initial challenges with DARPA, and when Perry approached you for AIxCC initially. What is, from your perspective at an AI company, what is your perspective on DARPA's goals with AIxCC, and what is the problem that they were trying to solve here?
Well, so one of the reasons why I was so excited to get the outreach from Perry was that she was pursuing this as a challenge, right? This open, competitive format that could bring in, non-traditional participants to DARPA's work, and because, normally there's, if you're looking at government contracting, like it's not exactly something you can like rock up to as a startup and just start doing, right? But these challenges that DARPA does, I'd had some previous experience having competed in one before. So I competed in DARPA's Spectrum Collaboration Challenge, which was a grand challenge they ran from 2016 to 19, I believe. I competed in it with in a personal capacity, along with my longtime research partner Mark Newland, who himself is a prolific DARPA challenge competitor. And we just did it in our nights and weekends, right? We were able to just sign up for this, this game that seemed interesting, qualify our way in, and go up against companies and academic labs and these other entities that were doing it full time. And we took some different approaches to them. It was also a very different challenge too. The SC2 was not or Spectrum Collaboration Challenge was not a security-focused challenge. It was focused on wireless spectrum optimization. So designing radios that could self-organize to efficiently use the spectrum. And Mark and I have had a lot of background in wireless security. We've done a lot with software radio, and it just seems super interesting, like a lot of fun. But so we kind of just said, hey, that looks interesting, weird, and hard. Let's go see what we can do. So we signed up, called our way in, and we wound up making the finals and making some money and building some cool stuff, and it was great. So when Perry reached out about this, I was like, well, this is just too perfect. Like OpenAI has to be involved. So we OpenAI have been involved in AIxCC as a technology partner, which means that we've made our models available to all the competitors for them to build their cyber reasoning systems on. And they've been able to use our latest and greatest models as the technology has evolved too. Again, GPT 3.5 at the very beginning, and we saw that competitors were running our 4 series models or reasoning models and all that too. But so I think the forum makes a lot of sense because it's gotten a ton of people involved, and now the 7 finalist teams, not only the 7 finalist teams get to go on and continue pursuing their work, they've all chosen to open source it too. So we have not only these open source reasoning systems, we also have the competition data as well. So these competitions, they really they sort of they plant a lot of seeds, right? And they sort of bloom in various ways. So we have the results from the challenge, but this is really just the beginning, and the real work is ahead, and that's what I'm really excited to track looking forward.
Yeah, and on the note about involvement with AIxCC, over the last year we've been super involved with all of the teams, quite frankly, in making sure that they're enabled to use our models to compete in the challenge. We've also learned a lot from them. The interaction with the teams has been incredible. Learning the methods that they're employing, that they hypothesize and test and either validate or not, has really been enlightening for us in how we think about applying models to solve these problems. And it's interesting because about 9 months ago or so, we spoke to a couple of the teams, and they talked about a method that pretty much just used AI for just a tiny piece of the problem, and heavily relied on fuzzing and more traditional tools for the vast majority of the system. And the evolution over the last 9 months has been definitely tilting towards leveraging the models for reasoning, for their ability to call tools and orchestrate tools, and really tie all that stuff together in a much more sophisticated way. That's been that's really led to some quite significant results for all the teams involved. Why don't we actually talk about some of the results briefly? Because the semifinals, the teams did well. Like, they definitely found bugs. They definitely succeeded in a lot of places. But in the finals, my understanding is some of the teams actually found real bugs in code that weren't intended to be in the competition.
I do feel like everyone should just let SQLite alone. You know, like just it doesn't need this kind of pain anymore. The developers are sad, and we're sharing that sadness with them. But I do think the results were really fascinating. You know, actually, this is a very interesting thing that Ian said. He's like, people used fuzzing, and now we're using reasoning. And I actually remember at the very beginning of fuzzing, everyone made fun of it. And they were like, why are you even doing that? That's stupid. You're just sending a lot of large strings to a program, and if it crashes, you claim a point. That's dumb. And I'm like, well, fuzzing is in many ways the best kind of reasoning we have. It is reasoning. It's just an expensive way to do reasoning. But CPUs are actually cheap, so it kind of works out. And in the sense now, it's sort of like, well, we've really optimized, like, they're both very randomized search problems, right? So fuzzing randomly generates strings, and you hope you reach something, and you might be able to guide it a little bit using coverage analysis, for example. And the same thing, in a sense, is true for what we're doing with the large language models, except I feel like we're reaching heights that the fuzzers could never get to. And what we saw during this contest that was really fascinating was you started at GPT-4o, which can barely call tools sometimes. And you reach up, and at the very end, GPT-5 is released, which is an amazing, astounding model that can do all these crazy things with what you give it, what the program can read an entire file and understand what it does, and even like try to intuit the intent of the developer and say, oh, the developer must have wanted to do this other thing, but they actually screwed that up, right? So that is a fascinating difference from beginning to end. When Matt was talking about, you know, how fast this is changing, as a team, I would have been very intimidated trying to develop an architecture that leveraged a model in 2024 and then had to use it in 2025.
I think it goes beyond the teams too, right? Like, DARPA had like quite a job on their hands when they were designing this competition in terms of having to anticipate where this was all going, right? Because they basically had to like look at the world, design a rule set that, you know, to define this game that competitors could then come and play in, that would get the results that they were looking for, right? And these DARPA challenges are really they're an exercise in incentive design, right? And that DARPA needs to define a game, a scoring algorithm, incentives, all that, to shape the outcomes they want. Like, they have to define the what, but then it's up to the competitors to figure out the how, right? So all those things have to come together sort of, under the backdrop of this very rapidly changing technology landscape, right? And it was very, like, it could have been possible, right, that, like, during the course of this program, this challenge, that there had just been like evolutions and breakthroughs that would have completely upended their assumptions, right? And I'll actually be curious to hear from competitors later if that was true. Like, I want to know sort of where you were surprised and what those, what those big disruptions were, because I imagine there were some. But I think that one of the things that DARPA got very deeply right in designing the structure of this challenge was the emphasis on the importance of patching, right? The original Cyber Grand Challenge was much more kind of, exploitation focused, whereas with this, I mean, they give so many points and they really weight not just the discovery of vulnerabilities, but the fixing of them. The G in the GPT acronym stands for generative, right? So I think this is a really, sort of powerful melding of like the game format and then the tools that we have now, in that we can apply these tools not only, for like the security engineering exercise of finding these vulnerabilities, but also the security engineering exercise of fixing them and closing them. So, yeah, I think that that's like a really interesting dynamic to reflect on. That a lot of things had to fall into place, and I haven't had the opportunity to dig into all the data yet. I think they just open sourced it yesterday, but I look at the results, and I think the teams found something like 67% of known vulnerabilities in the data set. Is it more than that? I see somebody. 77. And then finding sort of novel vulnerabilities too. That's really profound, right? And then really good patching performance in that too. So I look at that as a really nice setup for what I think we hope is going to come from this, which is real world impact, right? Like solving vulnerabilities in this game state is really cool. It's proof of life. But why do we do it? It's because we want to make software safer. If you caught Andrew's keynote yesterday, you heard him sort of give this very very, very sincere kind of look at the world, right? There's that AIxCC cartoon of the pyramid of blocks representing the modern software landscape, where you have all these amazing features built up on the weak links of the mosaic of dependency that support everything. And I think we're at the point now where we now can look beyond this competition to the impact we all want to create.
So the different variables that we've got at our disposal right now are the current CRSs that have been open sourced. Not all of them have been open sourced yesterday. There are a couple that are going to come out over the next, I believe, 2 months or so. So we've got the CRSs, we've got models as they evolve and continue to evolve, and we've also got the results from the teams that competed in the competition. So how do you both think about where this audience, where people that want to get involved in solving the problem of that tiny block that the entire system's resting on, fixing that, how can people leverage these 3 different variables or more to actually make a difference and start attacking the problem and making the world safer?
So I think one thing that catches me from those 3 things that you said is that it doesn't have to be the teams moving forward so much as the whole community. And there's a million questions to answer. For example, we found 77% of the injected vulnerabilities into the data set. What about the other vulnerabilities? Why can't we find those? Are they a different type of vulnerability? Are they in code that's too deep for the model? Is it too confusing for the model? Do we find them now with GPT-5 and no one had time to integrate GPT-5 into it? Is it that some models and some systems find particular types of bugs very well and don't find others at all? There's 1,000, what if we gave them a bigger budget? What if we gave them a smaller budget and just let them spread themselves more widely across their solution set? There's a million questions. What if we combine 2 of these systems to do different things in different ways, right? There's no reason you can't take 2 of the systems that didn't perform that well on the game and then put them together and you're like, well, we just solved all Java deserialization problems, right? I think, what if you build a system that's a specialist, right? It only takes in particular static analysis data and it manages to use that data in a very specific way through the data flow analysis, right? So it managed to do it very cleanly. Will that generate really good results on Rust, but nothing on C, for example, right? So, and I think there's just so many questions from a technical perspective to answer that are not answered at all by a contest. And that's great, because it means the community has a huge role to play moving forward. And not just the community of companies, but actually the community of hackers and individuals. Anybody, honestly, can run one of these things and can, in fact, go forward and answer even one question. Even a blog post on, here's a bug that was not found. I looked at it, and here's why this one system doesn't find that bug. It's just too complicated at this function, and it couldn't go through this particular code flow and reason about it properly. And when I change the way it works just a little bit, I get it to go through that code flow, and it finally finds that bug, right? Like there's a million experiments you can do now that you could not have done 2 days ago, which I think is really exciting. Obviously, the teams themselves know the systems the best, but maybe they should be all reading the other systems, sort of building themselves a little mini hybrid monster system, and then be like, well, actually, we find things that we didn't even know were real, right? Like, I think there's a lot of areas of this problem to reason about. I think it may be that people realize that this was just a point-in-time demonstration, and because the technology is changing so fast, all the reasoning systems we've built need to get sort of changed over time to keep up with the models. So there's room to grow for all of us.
So just building on Dave's call to action here, there's something really powerful about sort of the last couple of years of development in AI and language modeling, in that the barrier to access this technology has never been lower. Like, we now have powerful AI systems that are just at the other end of an API call. Before I stepped in my new role, I was the CISO and head of security at OpenAI for 5 years, and we were able to build defensive capabilities on AI systems and language models that previously would have taken a team of PhDs and a multi-year research effort to maybe be successful, right? To apply traditional machine learning techniques to training models and gathering data sets and things like that. Whereas now we have these really powerful tools that you can just experiment with. It's something that's out there for all of us to experiment with. So I would impart to the community that if you haven't considered these as part of your tool set, give it a shot. As you do, let us know what you think. Like, we want feedback from the community on where these tools are really helping you, where they're not, so we can make them better. Hard feedback is the best feedback. So, as you explore and experiment, tell us how we can meet your needs better, so that together we can move forward on these really important problems.
So what does that engagement look like? Like, in a year from now, what artifacts would you want this audience to create? What reports do you want to be out there? What blog posts do you want to be out there? Like, what does that look like? What does success in this look like in a year from now?
So, I mean, I would ask all the teams to look at their system and look at what they found and what they didn't find, and write just one little thing about the kinds of things they can find. This is a very subjective question, actually. Whether or not a bug is hard to find is very subjective in some sense, mentally, for most hackers. You're like, I see it right away. And everyone else is like, nah, I don't know how to see that at all, right? So this is a very subjective question for a human. For the machines, we now have some data, right? These are objective. Some bugs did not get found by any of the teams, and some bugs got found by all of the teams right away. So at this point, we have a ranking. But there's a lot to learn just about one system, what you found, what you didn't find, and why. And you could go as granular as possible, and I think you still get great data out of that. And I think testing with the new models gives you another set of data. I think testing with different pieces of your system turned up and turned down gives you a whole, testing on wider ranges of software. Like right now you have, I forget how many repositories they tested on, 20-something repositories. Let's test it on another 20 randomly picked, right? Like, I think that's where you start seeing like, oh, we're actually learning a lot more about just the fabric of how all of this works. I think there's a book to be written about the results. I would love to write that together as a community. Obviously, OpenAI is heavily invested in understanding these problems. And we're here to work with the community. That's why we're all sitting up here on stage. I know Ian has a lot to do, but he's here right now because we want to be part of the research with all of y'all. We're not hard to get a hold of. We're part of the community as well. We have been for the history of DEF CON, essentially. And we're really looking forward to learning these things together as a community.
I have some tactical asks that broadly sort of orbit. Let's dig into the data. Let's dig into this competition so we can learn from it. I'd like to know from you all, whether it's from blog posts or feedback or whatever, what areas did the challenge represent well? What areas are yet to be explored? Because all the challenges were in C and Java. That is a slice of the pie, but it's not the whole pie. The relative performance, as Dave was saying, I think that's going to be great to know. Just digging into the data set that's going to be open source so that we can collectively learn where these systems are performing well and where they have room to grow, I think is going to be really powerful. If you're interested in exploring these questions, I'd love to connect with you. We're going to obviously be pretty interested in the data too, but we want to work in partnership with you all. Later today, from 4 to 6, a bunch of us are going to be hanging out just around the corner here at the industry collaborators area. So if you want to come say hello, that'd be a good place to come and meet us, and we can chat.
Awesome. Any final things that you want the audience to know before we wrap up?
I mean, I think there's a million things this is a really interesting space. I would love to know what people thought of the challenges DARPA wrote and what they missed, right? Like from the competitor's perspective, and even from the broader community's perspective, I would love to see are race conditions covered properly, right? Like, are there things like that recent Git bug, right? That's a fascinating bug. I would love to see if there's bugs like that in the data set. And I would love, even if it's not, I would love to see people create their own evaluation data sets with injected vulnerabilities and test these systems against them to see where the upper limits really are for these systems. Because I've heard from a lot of the competitors, they're like, oh, I had a little bug, so we didn't run properly on some of these examples, right? Like, I mean, that's the nature of a game. But I would love much more real research done on how these systems work, and we're really looking forward to seeing some of you do that. I see some heads nodding. I know you have the same bug I do. You want to know. This thing's thinking. We want to see it go.
All right, so parting thoughts. So I joined OpenAI in 2020, mid-2020. It was right as we were releasing GPT-3 on the API. And I came in, tasked with building the security program, and I had these grand ideals, this ambition of building this, truly modern AI native security program powered by this breakthrough transformative technology, GPT-3. That, of course, is a cute idea in hindsight. I mean, the model just was not there, right? But in the years that's followed, and what we've seen since then, we've seen more and more frontiers get open for us as security practitioners. And I think the first moment for me where I really felt it was in the process of training GPT-4. We ran a whole bunch of tests, on some security operations use cases, on some data analysis use cases. If you caught my talk at the AIxCC stage last year, you heard me talk about some of those details. But I look back to 2020, and that's like 5 years of progress on top of a space that's decades old. And really, when we think about sort of generative AI or language modeling, or when we talk about AI today colloquially, we're really just talking about the last 8 years of progress, right? Because that's the Transformer paper that most of this stuff is based on came out in 2017. Can any of us say what the world is going to look like 5 years or 8 years from now, or what our profession is going to look like? I don't think so. I think you look at what's happened to the discourse, even here at DEF CON, and how we're all working, it's changed so much. So I think there's a call to action here for us as a community, really just to do what we're good at, right? Which is to remain curious, to remain nimble, to learn, to dig in, to challenge these things, to poke and prod them, to test them, and also to put them to work, right? There's a lot that we as a community, as a software ecosystem, have not yet solved. And we now have a new tool in our toolbox that we can bring to bear to ultimately create what we all are here, what we all want, which is progress, right? I want software to be more secure. And I'm excited to using the levers that I have at OpenAI to try to create that change. I look forward to hopefully working with you all and as partners in taking the lessons that we learn here to put them to work in the broader community in terms of doing everything that we can to make the world more secure.
The wrapping up of the finals yesterday is a major milestone. So congratulations to all the teams that competed, not just the 7 teams in the finals, but everyone throughout the entire competition. The advancement of the research here really is outstanding. Where the technology is today is so much farther along than I think anyone that started this competition thought it would be. I'm excited to see where things are going to be in a year from now and 2 years from now. As you said, we can't predict the future with this, so I'm not going to try to ask what the hard questions are that we're going to have to answer in a year or 2 years from now are. But we want the engagement from all of you. We want to know what you think are the hard problems that need solving still. We want to know what isn't working and why we think it's not working, where we think that the models are just kludging it and getting the right answer versus really, truly nailing it every single time. Give us examples of those. Dive into the data. As Dave said, publish blog posts on this. Like, we want to advance the research here, and we want to make our models better at doing all this, and we want to enable you all to solve these problems that we're all here to solve.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks for having us. And congratulations to all the teams.